Cassidy. I'm an America First Republican, and I'm running for Congress in the 3rd District against Michael Cassidy. And as y'all can probably tell, I'm not originally from around here. I was born and raised in Maryland and then raised up in Northern Virginia. And that's where I was during the attacks of September 11th. And I drive by the Pentagon, I see the smoldering outer shell of the Pentagon every day on my way to school. And I knew then and there that I was going to join the Navy and serve the country against all who do her harm. So I joined the Navy, I got lucky, I got a pilot slot, got to fly F-18s, so to land on aircraft carriers, that was quite an experience, I'll tell you what. And then the Navy sent me to Meridian in 2016 to be an instructor pilot. And then I got off active duty a little over a year ago, but I decided to stick around Meridian, stick around Lauderdale County. And my current job is I fly as a test pilot at the naval base, but I also still fly as an instructor pilot in the reserves. I don't have any any political background. This is the first time I'm jumping into politics, but I'm doing it because I can't ignore all the evil things that are going on in our country today and have been for some time. Our founders wouldn't recognize what our country's become. Our grandparents wouldn't recognize what our country's become. And I'm afraid of what our country's gonna be like in the next 5, 10, 25 years if it keeps going on its current path. So that's why I decided to jump in and try to do something about it. Now, I don't know that I'd be running for the 3rd District if we had a representative who was truly representing the very conservative district like a true conservative. But Mr. Guest simply hasn't done that. He voted for the January 6th Commission. He was one of just a handful of Republicans who voted for that. And anybody with half of the political brain at the time knew it was just going to be another witch hunt, just like the Mueller investigation, just like all the Russian collusion, just like all the impeachment votes that they had, just another witch hunt. But Mr. Guest voted for it. And that legislation, at least 20 times, it talks about everybody who was up there on the Capitol as a domestic terrorist. As a domestic terrorist, that's everybody, not just the handful of people, because there are a couple of people that did some violence that day, but the overwhelming majority of people were just people that were up there because they saw all the nonsense that happened with the election of 2020. And Michael Guest, again, voted for that legislation that's called a domestic terrorist. He was a prosecutor. Now, I heard he was maybe a decent prosecutor in Rankin County. But he ought to know about due process, and he ain't said anything about the people that have been being held as political prisoners, really, up in D.C. without any bail, just being held there without any charges. He said nothing in their defense. So that's just a demonstration of his lack of political wisdom. Another area that he's been a rhino on is immigration. Now, he'll talk about securing the border, but that's kind of a layup as a Republican. It's like being pro-life, being pro-Second Amendment. Those are the easy things to say that you want to secure the border. Well, half of illegal immigration, it comes from not people coming across the border, but it comes from people overstaying their work visas. And Mr. Guest wants an unlimited, he wants to take away the cap on a lot of segments of employment for these visas. One of the first things that he did in 2019 when he became Congressman is to send a letter to Nancy Pelosi asking for more visas. He actually co-sponsored legislation to get more visas. And that's what's leading to, that's been, just like people crossing the border, as big. And Michael Guest wants more of it. We need to get rid of birthright citizenship. Michael Guest, we need to get rid of birthright citizenship, and he's for keeping it around. We need to mandate E-Verify. Mr. Guest doesn't say anything about that. And we also need to deport all the illegals that are in this country right now. He doesn't want to say anything about that. We also need to talk about the appearance of corruption. Now, 90% of Americans are in favor of term limits, and I'm one of them. I've signed a pledge that says that I'll vote for legislation, it'd be an amendment to the Constitution, that would cap representatives at 3 terms, senators at 2 terms. Because once they get up there and they're in DC for a while, people kind of forget what it's like to just be an average American, and they get embedded in the swamp. And Mr. Guest, he's been there for a few years, and he ain't said anything about term limits. We got to do something about it. Speaking of the appearance of corruption, one other thing that Mr. Guest probably hasn't talked about when he comes here for town meetings, doesn't talk about on his emails or his Facebook, he was cited for congressional stock trading violations back in November. And that's something that when I get to Congress, I'm gonna make sure that if you're in Congress, or the spouse of somebody in Congress, that you shouldn't be able to trade stocks. It's too easy for corruption to happen. It happened back in March of 2020. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, they got a classified briefing on COVID. And then they went and they called their stockbroker and they said, buy this and sell this. And they got caught. We gotta get rid of that, even the temptation of corruption, because we don't want to think about our representatives being corrupt. So my experience in the Navy, it taught me how to fight. And I'm gonna take that dedication and energy to the halls of Congress when I'm elected. Because the district, 3rd District of Mississippi, it's far too conservative to have somebody who's a rhino representative. We need a true America First fighter who's gonna hold the establishment's feet to the fire, just like President Trump did, just like people such as Marjorie Taylor Greene are doing to this day. But I can't do it by myself. I need help from people like you. I need people that are gonna help volunteer, people that are gonna help fundraise, people that are gonna tell their friends and family about me, and then most importantly, to come out and vote on June 7th.